Yo, what is going on guys, Flashverse here and welcome back to another video on The Flash Season 7, and this will be my review and breakdown for The Flash Season 7 Episode 9 titled Timeless, which is also the third last episode of graphic novel number 3. Yeah, we had a couple of major things taking place during this episode, which were all very cool stuff. We got the reveal of the Timeless Wells mystery, which has been established since like episode 3. We had we had major time travel being involved, but one of them was a bit smaller than the other one. And we obviously had Harrison Wells returning for this episode, which was so great to see him once again. And we also had Bart Allen and Nora West Allen teases. Also, we got to meet our Force users once more in preparation for these final 2 episodes, which will be very intense. But just giving you guys my quick initial thoughts on this episode before I actually break it down and give you guys my overall thoughts on like each scene. I loved the episode. The majority of the episode for me, it was great. This episode is probably my third favorite episode of the season, mainly because I'm just a sucker for time travel overall, but I really enjoyed the storyline of the episode. However, there was some dialogue or some elements they used which I just wasn't a fan of, and I will get into more detail with that in just a second. But obviously, before I go over anything else, spoiler alert, because this is a review and breakdown after all, so I'll be going over each scene bit by bit as I give you guys my overall thoughts on it. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, go watch the episode and come back later for this review and breakdown, because there are some major spoilers which you certainly wouldn't want to hear from me. But for those who are staying, be sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you are aware of more Arrowverse content coming your way. Okay, so this episode kicks off from where we left off during episode 8 with the Speed Force villain reveal, and she obviously kills Alexa. Now we have the Speed Force telling Barry why she killed Alexa, and she's blaming Barry for everything. She's just like, I'm cleaning up this mess you made, in which we have Barry responding, I'm supposed to save lives, not destroy them. And as I said, she's blaming Barry for the creation of the forces, in which Barry is to blame because the forces were created the night the Speed Force was revived. So she explains the connection the Force users have towards Barry, and that how corrupted these forces are towards their users, and that it's very unnatural, which is why the Speed Force wants to get rid of these forces. She's asking for Barry's help once again, in which Barry refuses to help the Speed Force, and this is when the Speed Force loses it. She goes all crazy. She's like, you're supposed to help me. She starts electrocuting and stuff, but then she promises Barry that she will destroy all of the forces. I really liked the scene. It was very intense. I was very interested to see where this would lead into. But then we have Team Flash in the Cortex, and they're talking about Alexa's death and how Nora was able to defeat, if you want to say, a god so easily, because this Strength Force, or the other Force users in general, they're so goddamn powerful. Nora was able to defeat her like it was nothing. We have Barry being upset that he has been fooled and manipulated once again, and he blames himself for the death of Alexa. We then have Chester being able to find readings during the night the Speed Force was revived, and this was essentially proof that it was indeed Barry and Iris who created these forces during the night the Speed Force was revived. Now we then head over to Camilla and Cisco in Jitters, and Camilla essentially gets like a job offer at San Francisco, and this is obviously setting up Cisco leaving the season. And Camilla basically has this like, special camera lens where she can identify the Force users, and that plays somewhat of a main role during this episode. Now we head back to Star Labs, and Barry has this plan to time travel back to the night when the forces were created and prevent the forces from hitting the users. And Iris is against this. She thinks it's not only risky for creating another timeline issue like Flashpoint, but also Iris talks about how Nora and the forces should be talked to rather than just wiping them out of their powers through time travel. Now, Barry then counter argues against that, and he says if he doesn't follow up through with this plan, the Speed Force will kill the other forces, and he's not going to be able to do anything about it. Because if you guys remember, during episode 8, when Barry threw the lightning at the Speed Force was moving at super speed, and Barry was literally frozen. He couldn't do anything. So he would be helpless if the Speed Force actually tries to kill the forces, Barry will not be able to do anything about it. So he wants to go through with this plan and get rid of the forces so that the Speed Force doesn't end up killing anybody. And this is where Iris is not on board with Barry's plan, and she's like, you know what, I'm not a part of this, you do what you're going to do. But we then head over to the Central City Citizen, where Iris is talking to Camilla and Allegra about what Barry is about to do, and they need to get to Nora before Barry follows through with this time travel plan. And Camilla is able to get some sort of kinetic energy readings off her camera lens, which was pointing at Iris, and this is when they, find out that she is also somehow connected to the other forces, and they're going to use that to their advantage. Now, we then have Barry wanting to modify the tachyon device to basically collect force particles instead of photon particles. Barry mentions to Cisco that he will try and find a way to execute this time travel mission without messing up with the timeline, because we know whenever Barry tries to time travel, it doesn't end up well. It always messes with the timeline in some way. Now, Chester then mentions that he wishes that a Wells was there to help out, because he would be an expert at these sorts of stuff, in which this is where Barry gets the idea to get someone's help. So we then get this mini time travel at first, where Barry goes to Star City in the year of 2000, and he speeds into Harrison Wells' house, the original Harrison Wells, aka Timeless Wells, and Barry asks Wells for help and whether or not he will be able to, quote unquote, accomplish the impossible. So we have them heading back to present day in Star Labs, and Team Flash are prepping for this time travel mission, and Cisco and Chester see Wells and they just get excited over his return. Now, Wells is confident that this mission will work without altering the timeline, and the way they explain it was that Wells was there when the forces were created, so they will use the other him as a beacon to lock onto, so that Wells goes to the exact moment and help Barry get the particles. And then when Barry and Wells go back to that night, the forces would be created within a 17-day period, and Wells will create like a time bubble from that moment until present day, therefore preventing any timeline changes. So yeah, Wells is confident that this will not cause any issues with the timeline. Now, one scene that really caught me off guard was then we had Dion arriving in Star Labs. He is drawn to his connection to Barry, but he's unable to tell what it was. Now, Team Flash obviously introduced themselves. Dion's obviously met Cisco and Chester, but they're trying to avoid telling Dion their plan, because if Dion finds out, it's not going to end well. But Dion knows something is up, so he freezes everyone and confronts Barry. And this was a very, very intense scene, and I really, really enjoyed this scene. But he is obviously against Barry's plan, and this then leads to Dion destroying the tachyon device. However, Chester was able to save the collecting device. Therefore, Team Flash's time travel plan can still work. They just need to create another tachyon knockoff, but they still have the collecting device, which will help them collect the force particles once they time travel. Now, Cisco is then starting to be against Barry's plan as well after listening to what Dion has said, and he's more leaning to Iris's side, and he thinks that it is wrong for them to go back in time and get rid of the forces from existence, in which Barry mentions that if he doesn't do this, Nora will go for them, and this is pretty much what scares Barry and what motivates him to just follow through with this plan and not stop executing this plan. So we then have this talk between Joe and Barry. Now, normally these Joe and Barry talks are great, and this one is no different. However, I did have an issue with some of the dialogue they used over here. So let's go through this scene at first. So he talks to Barry about his first encounter with Wally and what happened after. And the message he's trying to tell Barry over here is that this example is that he should guide the Force users to the right path, and how he should begin to judge them based on the after result rather than judging them who they are right now. It was a pretty good talk until Joe mentions the power of love once again. I just don't like whenever they mention these sorts of stuff. I'm just not a fan of it. But it was a pretty good talk. Barry is a bit conflicted about this plan at first, but he still wants to follow through with it. Now we then have Team Citizen tracking down the Speed Force, and Iris has a plan to look for Nora Allen or the Speed Force. So they go to the Allen household, in which we go to Barry's childhood house, but instead of encountering Nora, Team Citizen encounter Psych. He essentially gives them fear visions, but we're not able to see what Camilla and Allegra see, but we see what Iris is seeing, and her fear is Nora. But the thing over here is Iris is able to overcome the fear due to their connection. So that was a very interesting twist which they added on as well. But now we have the time travel mission being executed, where Barry and Wells go back to the night of episode 3, or the year of 2020. But this is where Wells from episode 3's mystery has been revealed, and we have him looking at future Barry and his future self. And this scene just gave me chills, because whenever we have these time travel stuff, and a past version of our characters notice our future version of the characters, it's just something really, really great. I always love it. And obviously we haven't had actual time travel like this for so long, and as I said during the start of this video, I'm just a sucker for time travel, so I absolutely love this scene. But Barry speeds Wells up to the roof, and he is watching the lightning go up the sky for a while, until he walks into the lightning and he begins to absorb all the force particles. It was such a great scene. And we then got to see the scenes where all the Force users were getting erased from existence, since they would no longer get struck by those Force lightnings, since Barry has absorbed them inside the tachyon. Now Barry then remembers the talk he had with Joe earlier, and before he was obviously conflicted, but once he's actually executed the mission, it was basically like this trigger which makes him not follow through with this plan. So Barry realizes that he was in the wrong over here, and he releases the particles and lets the timeline play out as normal. And then we got to see these forces up in the sky. It was such a beautiful scene. I just really liked how it looked. But then we have Barry apologizing to Iris about what he was about to do, and that Iris was right, he shouldn't have done this. And we did also get a very interesting teaser of Nora and Bart Allen during the scene, where keeping the forces alive would affect the future speedsters, including some in the family, which was a cool reference to Barry and Iris's future kids, Nora Allen and Bart Allen. Now we get some strength force vibrations taking place after that, and this is where we get the reveal that Alexa woke up for a second in the medbay, and Caitlin just has no idea what was happening. And this leads to Barry and Iris's connection to the forces being able to bring Alexa back to life. So that was something pretty interesting, but it was something I had an issue with, because it wasn't with how Alexa was brought back. That was quite fine for me, but the whole, as I said before, the power of love thing and the connection with Iris and Barry have, I just don't like it, and I feel like it's just the lazy way to come up with a solution. So I just don't like these power of love stuff. Whenever they mention it, no matter what show it is, I will never like these stuff which is related to these two characters having this big power which they can do anything. I'm not a fan of it. But now it seems like Barry and Iris will try to get through to the other forces and team up with them against the Speed Force. So that will be something which I should look forward to. It seems pretty cool, and I cannot wait to see how these last two episodes play out. But then we did have Cisco and Camilla going okay, let's move to San Francisco. So once again, this is setting up Cisco leaving during the end of the season. Eric Wallace did say that he will be staying during the finale, so he will be there still. But again, episode 12 is titled Goodbye Vibration, so it could be that they're leaving over there and then Cisco comes back later. I'm not really sure. But now the goodbye with Wells, it didn't seem like this was the final goodbye. So I'm interested to see if we will actually see Wells come back sometime soon. We'll probably see Tom Cavanagh back as Reverse Flash during the 150th episode. But the way they ended off Timeless Wells over here, it doesn't seem like a final goodbye. If it was a final goodbye, I would be very disappointed with what they did. But I'm pretty sure this wasn't their final goodbye, and I think we will be seeing Timeless Wells sometime during the season. But then the episode ends with the Speed Force going up to Dion, and yeah, Dion is in trouble. We have Nora vibrating her hand towards Dion in a Reverse Flash way, and the episode ends. So I am very interested to see what happens next. Overall, I enjoyed this episode. The whole storyline for the episode was amazing. I loved it. I loved the Wells reveal with the whole time travel mission. The Speed Force is clearly up to no good, and now that she is revealed as the main villain, I cannot wait to see what she does with these remaining two episodes. But as I said, I love the time travel stuff a lot. I'm a sucker for time travel, as I kept saying during this video. But I'm just not a fan of the whole power of love thing. But I still enjoyed the episode overall. As I said during the start of this video, it's probably my third favorite episode of the season, just underneath episode 2 and then episode 1. So it was a pretty enjoyable episode regardless. So overall for this episode, I'll give a 9 out of 10. But yeah guys, thanks for watching. If you guys have enjoyed the video, please give a like and subscribe. Be sure to tell me in the comment section down below what you guys thought about this episode. And yeah, I will see you guys in my next video.